This lesson is about functions. A function is a rule that assigns exactly one output to every input. This means if I plug in a number, I should get out one answer. We use something called function notation. F of x equals 2x plus 5. F of x just means this is a function of x using the variable x to represent numbers we plug in. So if I want to plug in a number, I would plug it in for x, which is our input value. If I say f of 3, that means I want to plug in or input 3 into my equation. So I would plug 3 in for x and get 2 times 3 plus 5. The output, or answer I get back out, 11, would be the y value, and it's called the output. So I input 3, and my output is 11. The domain is all the input numbers, and the range is all of the output numbers. So if we have a table, all of the numbers we plug in for x listed in the left are the domain, and all of the numbers listed for y, the answers we got back out, are the range. So if I plug in 1, I get back out 6. If I plug in -3, I get back out 2. Notice that if we have 2 of the same number in the same column, like we have 2 in the y column more than once, we only list it once when we list the domain and the range. This table represents a function because every number we plugged in for x gave back one answer for y. Remember, that's not always the case. When we have an absolute value, for example, we can plug in one number and get back 2 answers. So not every table represents a function. We can identify whether or not a table or a relation or a graph is a function by checking to see if each input has one output. This relation maps the x values on the left to the y values on the right, and it's not a function because you can see that when we input 7, we have 2 outputs, 1 and 4. The lines connect an input on the left to an output on the right. This relation is a function. Every number on the left, which is an input for x, is connected by a line to only one output on the right. It's okay if 2 inputs have the same output, as long as they each only have 1. We can also graph all of these inputs and outputs as ordered pairs and see whether or not something is a function by looking at the graph. This is called a vertical line test. If we graph our function and we check to see whether or not a vertical line straight up and down will touch that function in only one place at a time, then it is a function. This first example is a function because every time I draw a straight up and down vertical line, it only hits that function once. On the right, we've graphed a function which is a circle, well, what we thought was a function. Turns out it's not a function because a vertical straight up and down line hits both the top and the bottom of the circle at the same time. This is called the vertical line test. Sometimes we'll get a piecewise graph, which means it's broken up into different parts. What you have to be aware of, even though it might look like 2 pieces are touching, if there's an open circle on the line, that means that that is not included in our graph. And if there's a closed circle, that means it is included. So a straight up and down line right there at 2 would be touching up at the top on the closed circle, but doesn't count as touching on the open or empty circle. So this would still be a function since it's not technically touching in an open or empty circle.